Hi guys, your motor's got a new microphone. I'm hoping the sound quality is a bit better. We'll see. We've had a bit of difficulties for like 40 minutes trying to figure it out, but here we go. Today I'm joined by Sam Ryde. I came across Sam a week or two ago. I was looking on the BBC News website and there was a interesting, I think it was a video, if I'm not mistaken, of your work, and we'll come on to exactly what that was, but in the photography space. So, welcome, Sam, and thanks for giving us some of your time.
Hi. Hi, thank you for having me.
So as people that listen to the show, watch the show know, like I always like to understand before we get to kind of where we are now, like how we've got to this place. So I looked into your background a touch and I saw A level, which for people who aren't in the UK is kind of like just you 17, 17 sort of age. You're kind of starting to
16,
choose
16 to 18, yeah.
16 to 18. You're starting to choose more specific subjects rather that are something that you want to kind of focus on, I suppose, rather than a generic curriculum in the UK. And one of the things you did was photography. Why
hmm
were you just interested from a very early age? Were your family involved? Like, why did you pick photography at that point?
I think, if I think back, if I've seen a camera, I found them fascinating. Always found them fascinating, and even crappy little point and shoot ones. I could never understand why my granddad couldn't get people's heads in a shot. He had an amazing ability to ruin every single photo he ever took, and I just thought, that's why can he just not? And I remember we went to a wedding when I was about 8, and I tried all these creative photos and took all these photos on an angle so that they were like not portrait, but just tilted slightly. And my mum told me off, and I was like, "No, you don't understand my creative. I'm being creative." And then that was kind of suppose like an acorn in the mind. And then my dad had an old SLR.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Pentax or Nikon. He had that in a camera bag, and I was just interested by the lenses, and the light meter was interesting. So then the college near my house, they provided A level in photography.
Mm-hmm.
But the camera was so old, it kept leaking light, and we had it fixed, and then it leaked light again, so the coursework didn't get finished. Um, and then I didn't take it academically any further. And I didn't think I was academically minded either, so I decided not to go to university. But I'd always been obsessed with having a camera and just the power of the documentation of having it with you at all times. It never left. So I'd always have like a tiny little Canon in my pocket and take photos of everything and everyone. And I just, I just love capturing the way that I see the world. And then when just as Twitter came out, I think, and Blogspot. Do you remember Blogspot? I don't know if Blogspot still exists. Does it?
No, I've never
No.
heard of it, but it could exist though.
So Blogspot so Twitter used to be was an extension of Blogspot.
Yes, I've read the book about that. They originally started it in that sphere. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, well, if I started a blog, what would I do? And immediately I thought I'd do a photo series. I'd take a photo every day. That's what I thought. That was my first thought. Then to be honest, I couldn't be bothered. It was so much effort to put. You'd have to upload every day, put on every day, and life got in the way. But then when I got an iPhone, it was so much more convenient. And I think I got the iPhone, my first phone, middle of January 2012, and I started start of Feb 2012. And I've just done it ever since.
And so you talked about kind of the your interest in taking photos. Like, where does that stem from? Are you also creative in other areas? You're obviously, you told me before, not obviously, but you told me you also a hairdresser. Like, is that also part of the same kind of like creativity? What do you get from that as well?
Yes, hairdressing is creative in a funny way. It's almost like a mathematics because everything's exact. It's like if I do this and I do this, this will happen. Whereas photography, I actually think is a bit more creative because I have the freedom to find the things that I think represent certain other things. So I like to find. 1234 is a separate project, but my other projects I like to find one of which is behind me. I like to find things in society that represent humanity and our effect on the world around us,
Hmm.
almost by they accidentally showcase who we are as a species and as a race of people, or the way that we treat things. There are certain kind of like silent traits that we leave behind that I think are fascinating, that I like to try and find. So that was the series behind me called Handwriting. That was the first series I had that got momentum. That was a book, and
Handwriting, yeah.
Yes, that's one of them behind me. That kind of got lots of traction. It got lots of press, and but I've always done the 1234 thing on the background. It used to be on Instagram. I stopped posting on Instagram after my house was broken into, and I felt like I was more interested in pleasing the audience than I was in fulfilling the brief that I'd given myself. And that brief was to kind of, number one, to be honest, and number two, to try and be creative in any situation. I've always got this theory that you can always take an interesting photo no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what if it's time to put my money where my mouth is, I'll put that into practice. I will try and take a photo every day at the same time, try and be creative, and try and be honest, which are two difficult briefs, actually, to try and be honest and creative at the same time. But
how did you come up with the 1234? It's just literally is it 1, 2, 3, 4 now? I think about it. Is that the reason why?
Yeah, exactly. So when I was a kid and I had my first digital watch, I used to see that time. I used to see it every day, and I got kind of started to think it was my time. That's my time of day. That's the time I noticed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of people see 11:11.
Yes.
Which is quite popular, and there's actually a Wikipedia page about 11:11 because there's a whole conspiracy behind it.
What does the conspiracy say about 11:11?
I haven't actually read it, but there's a John Ronson. Do you know John Ronson, the journalist?
I don't.
He's similar to Louis Theroux. He's got a series on Radio 4.
Okay.
He wrote The Butterfly Effect, and he wrote the Men Who Stare at Goats, the film with George Clooney.
Okay.
He's got a radio show devoted to 11:11, and it's all about confirmation bias. If you believe it, you'll see it, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But the 1234 for me, when I thought of doing the project, that was the only time that I thought about doing it. But interestingly, I had a phone call yesterday from a guy in LA who's done the same thing as me, but he chose 7:59 p.m. So he was a bit more thoughtful with his time. They thought about it and what would be the most interesting time of day was. When I thought about doing it, it was the only option as far as I could tell. As far as I wanted, that was the only. But that's the first time it popped into my mind.
I think I do a weekly vlog, kind of trying to give across my thoughts, inspire and motivate people, that kind of thing. And one of the things I did maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago was a piece called "Life's an Art, Not a Science," and what you're saying, like that person 7:59 is great for their reasons, but also your 12:34 is great for your reasons. And I think also staying back from the, you talk a lot on your website about you noticing unnoticed objects and architecture in modern life. So I actually think the fact that you've gone on a time that resonates with you and that's authentic and genuine rather than trying to just be different. And I think coming back to what you were saying is very interesting with the Instagram piece, that a lot of what people are following with the influencers, I hate that word, but you know what I'm referring to, people that post and have decent engagement. A lot of that is they're just posting what they think people want to see. And you'll also find, which is not necessarily a bad thing, a lot of kind of these people with 1 million plus followers, 100,000 followers will say, hey, what do you guys want to see more of? And I get it to an extent because like I understand, they've got a business and, that level it is a business, right? But I think more and more now people are looking for just authentic and genuine people that are just sharing wherever they feel comfortable. Some days they might share a story or two. They might be off for a week. They might be on for a week. Like, not this just like there's a guy. This is my personal opinion. I think it's called Jocko Wilk or something. I forget his name. He's basically an ex-military guy. One of these like David Goggins, who's very kind of motivational for certain people, and some people find it very useful. And honestly, his Instagram is purely his Casio G-Shock or something at 4:23, 3:59 a.m. Like, and that's all it is. It's just, hey, he gets 100,000 likes every time. You're like, what am I looking at? Like, this is so boring. But like, I guess again, horses for courses. Some people find that interesting. But I think it's very what you're saying about being just you. And of course, we all realize that Instagram is a snapshot of your life, quite literally and metaphorically. And on top of that, it's curated and you're showing your best bits or what you want people to see and how you want it to be interpreted. There is that. But I think if you look at, say, Cristiano Ronaldo, I was talking about with a friend about this. So he's now, I don't know, as of recording, he's over 400 million followers. He's the most followed person on Instagram, bar Instagram itself. Instagram itself is at 470 million. So he's about to get to that point for sure. And I was explaining to someone why I believe he's at that point and other sports stars equally as talented or not. And I think it's because he's so authentic and he resonates with people, because people have heard stories of when, I'm a big United fan, that when he was at United, yes, he had the talent, but actually he was there before everyone else. He was there after everyone else. He would train with weights in his ankles and all the rest of it. In other words, not only does he have the talent and people recognize that, but actually he's squeezed every little ounce of juice out of that possible potential. I think that's what resonates. And when you see what he's posting, yes, he posts occasionally about, I've got these new pair of sunglasses I'm selling, or this, that, this, the other. But I think people just resonate because he's authentic. And then that's what I think speaks volumes versus a lot of other people around that, yes, they've got a lot of following, but I think it's, I was speaking to them the other day again in a smaller way, like a micro-influencer. A friend of this person I was talking to is a micro-influencer. And she said growing up, this person used to wear like really kind of plain clothes and all the rest of it. And now she's on TikTok, she's got 100,000 followers. And all of a sudden now, every time they go out, she's wearing green alligator leather pants and like a pink like fedora or whatever you call it, you know? And all of her friends are like, look, people can adapt and change. Like, that's true. But sometimes you know if someone's just doing it for doing its sake or doing it because actually their characters evolve and whatnot. If their whole core being's changed, then you kind of question it. Where's this coming from? And this person was telling me that like she's losing followers all the time and she can't understand why. And this person believes, now I think it's probably true, people are starting to go, hold on a minute, this feels very forced. This doesn't feel like it's actually the real person. Like, what am I following here? Am I following someone who just wants to be followed? Or am I following someone who's just interesting and like is a interesting, yeah, to the audience?
Well, I was very careful with my 1234 account. I was very careful at the beginning. I was aware of the longevity of it, so I was very careful not to use filters or edit the photos in any way that would age them.
Yeah,
because filters. I mean, you look back at people's. I remember when I was in my the single days when you were on Tinder like 10 years ago.
Tinder, good old Tinder, eh?
Those photos that some of the people had on there were filtered.
Oh, like, but by the way, so
the edge of their life.
That hasn't changed at all. So really? now I was about a few months ago. I was like, as you do occasionally, like I was single. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to check out what's happening. So I go onto Tinder, and in fact, Hinge is much better, but that's a different side conversation. But I go onto Tinder just to have a look, and honestly, these people are 1, caked in makeup, 2, airbrushed to hell, and 3, when you go and see them, they never look like that. So like, what's the point? Like, I don't know what, but I guess some guys really into that. Like, they don't care. They know it's not like a genuine look like, but and then all these Snapchat filters where it's like a cartoon character type thing. You know what I'm trying to say, like caricature almost of your face. Each to their own.
Yeah. Each to their own. I mean, that's in a sense, it's kind of a social media as well. Those Tinder profiles, because they're portraying themselves the way they want to be seen, whether that's accurate or right or wrong. I don't know, just for a greater God to pass comment on. But I was always very careful not to try and age the photos. I knew they would age because the technology would change, and you can see that as you go through the photos from the beginning. They're a bit grainy and the camera's not quite.
So for people that want to look at it, I know it's not your account now, but I guess there is still some.
There's 7. I mean, there's 7 years of photos on the account.
So what's the actual account name? I'll pop it in the links. What's the actual account name?
It's 12:34 p.m. It's called.
So how do you actually? Is it 12?
Just written as one word.
As in, the word.
Found it. Yeah, 12. The word 12. The word 12. The word 30. The word 4 p.m.
Okay.
And then the past 2 years, I still take the photos, but I keep them personally and I turn them into a video, a 30-second video once a year.
A video, sorry.
Yeah. So now this is a 30-second video once a year rather than a photo a day, and mainly for security. So last week, obviously, when it was blowing up on the BBC, I thought I would post some images at 12:34. But there's something risky security-wise about letting the entire world know where you are at any given time.
Why don't you do like the day before? So like you post on Monday, you post for Sunday's 12:34. and
Yeah, I did. I was thinking about it. Yeah, I might start doing that.
I think
I don't mind doing
go on.
it. I don't mind doing it every now and then. I think I might just start doing it sporadically.
Or maybe
Well,
you don't actually post at 12:34, but it's from 12:34. So you post at 5 a.m. from that day before, or 5 p.m. from the same day or something. I think there's still, this is my personal opinion, I think there's something really beautiful about actually still post. I think people say this, right? I interviewed just the other day. He calls himself a social media artist, but he's basically a phenomenally talented artist that leverages social media. And he's saying, he's got like 60,000 followers on Instagram. It's like, the engagement not great. This is this. But like, it's still a great platform. I still find it like, it's like anything. I talk about this a lot as well. People say social media and technology is so bad and this and that, and it certainly can be. But it's a tool, right? It's like a fire or a kitchen knife. In the right hands, it's a great, delicious meal and some warmth and whatnot. In the wrong hands, you're killing someone and you can set a house on fire. Instagram's the exact same. If you're say you're into art, whether a collector or just a follower of it or a painter yourself, you can see it, far more than ever before, on something like Instagram or YouTube, etc. It's what you choose to do with it, and it's none of our places to tell anyone how or how not to use something. But if all you're following is like, women or guys that are aesthetically this way or another, and they're all filter and it's making you feel terrible, maybe have a look at yourself and go, is it the best use of it? Or could I follow, if I'm into watches, about watches, or, there's lots of ways you can do it. But back to your thing, I think, there's something really cool about like actually, whether you do it once a week and you pick the best 12:34 you had, I don't know whether you do it, but I think there's something really cool about that. I really like it. I actually am very obsessed with time. So I'm as for my family since 1958 of being into watches as a retailer, and I've personally collected for many years and work in that space as well. What I used to do like the word time and then 3 dots and then like time for this. I've kind of like moved that on a bit. So now what I do is like on my Instagram story, I put the time and everything. And it's actually for me, so then later on in my camera roll, if I'm going through my own story, I can go, oh, wow, today, what did I do? Oh, I did all these cool things. Because often I do so much, I'm sure you do, you kind of forget, oh, I had that meal today. That was the same day. And so I do it for that reason. It's a nice, for me anyway, I like as I can see, oh, like it's a nice kind of, it's literally a story, like what it should be, exactly what I'm doing. It's not every second, of course, but it's something that's interesting or whatnot. But that's how I kind of, my little 10 pence worth.
I do. I mean, Damien Hirst says that all his art is based on his life and death. Everything he does. Okay. So his most recent collection is Blossom, and before that was Butterflies. So there's the both of which kind of reflect a certain time. And then he's obviously got that. I think the one with have you seen the cow's head with the flies?
No.
I think that's actually called Life and Death. So it's a rotting cow's head in a perspex box.
Is it 50 million pounds?
The death. It might be something like that, yeah. So it's about the death of the cow, and then the rebirth of the fly, and then it's the life cycle of the fly in this big box.
Okay.
And I do think about the fact is all art about life and death? I mean, definitely, the 12:34 is definitely documenting life.
Yes.
And if you do it for long enough, you will document death as well.
Yes.
Just you have to.
Well,
and you could say in some ways, if you want to be a dick about it, you could fancy it up and say, all time is dying as you take it.
Right, but
we'll peel those layers back.
I mean, him saying that all art's life and death is, you could, again, you can interpret it how you want, of course. You could interpret it as well, that's so profound. But like, I would say, well, that's pretty obvious. It's like saying all life's breathing. Like, yeah, of course. There's what is there? There's nothing else. There's either life or death. You can't, like, it's mutually exclusive. It's binary. You can't have like a semi-life and a semi-death. Like, so. Yeah, I see where it's coming from, but I find it interesting.
He's definitely going with it.
Yeah, I find it. I'm sure he is. I'm sure he's making a ton out of it with his PR machine. What I find interesting with like Damien Hirst, and it's happening in the watch business a lot now, is this kind of artificial demand that's been stimulating and increasing prices. Like with some of his works, I'm sure it's been done with him, and I know it has been done where they get friends of friends to bid high in auction, so then it sets a pin effectively of a floor of a price for their future work. So it just keeps like escalating. And are people actually paying 30 million for the shark and the diamonds, whatever it was, Who knows? But it's cool. He does some cool stuff. So just going back to your kind of linear like history of how you got to this point. So you do this A-level in photography, and presumably, did you have like a project, a specific idea as to what to do? And was this also the first time that you formally studied photography, as opposed to when you were 8 years old, and obviously ahead of that, just kind of figuring stuff out and just having fun with it?
Yeah, that was the first official education into. It was very technical, so it was very dark room. Um, Bits about the camera and depth of field and stuff like that. I was lucky enough 2 weeks ago to gave a talk at the Photographers Gallery, which was definitely
What is
a
that?
big life. The Photographers Gallery is, I think it's one of the biggest photography galleries in the world. It's in London.
Okay.
It's a very, very important place, and I was invited to give a talk there about how I work and everything, and then go through people's portfolios.
Wow.
And one of the guys on the course, he's currently doing a degree in photography, and his university don't have a darkroom, so they can't print any of their work at all. He was really pissed off about it, but that process of printing and understanding how film works now, even though everything's digital and you put everything into Lightroom, the fundamental basics they're still the same. It was just a bit more convoluted when I was 18 and do it with a massive projector, and you're physically handling paper and controlling exposure and the quality of the colors. But things like Lightroom, I mean, Lightroom is a play on words of darkroom, isn't it? Surely it has to be. But understanding where to exposure, underexposure, overexposure, controlling the depth and the contrast, all those kinds of things. The fundamentals of that education are still the same. It's just a different process.
So it's interesting because you mentioned obviously that like Instagram filters, not that I don't agree with, but it would age your photos, how you put it.
Mm.
But then you also say that you use the technology, whether it's Photoshop, Lightroom, or whatever it is, to add some depth or whatnot to the photographs. Where do you see the line? Or again, is it an art form, and if you feel like you need a bit more exposure, then you will or you won't? Like, how do you? What I'm trying to get to the point is like, how do you say, on the one hand, Instagram filters are too much, but on the other hand, this is acceptable in your creative opinion? How do you kind of like justify that?
The Instagram filters they're a bit generic and there's no control. If you've got Lightroom is a tool to enhance the raw image and in my opinion, it's an essential tool. But even in a darkroom, the image that comes out of the camera is not the final image. You manipulate it, you control it. Lightroom's the same. It gives you more creative control over your image, whereas an Instagram filter, it's just an off-the-shelf filter. You can't control exposure. You can't control. I mean, if you've got in my hand dry series, for instance, when that image behind me, there's one light in that room. So for me to for instance, on this photo here, I wanted the entire thing to be in focus. So I have to have a really small aperture. I have to have a really, really long shutter. Well, really slow shutter speed. So the shutter's open. I think on this image, the shutter was open for like 2 minutes.
Wow.
So if you think about that, there's only one light in that room. It's just the light is just about here.
Oh, I'm looking at it now. I thought it was a collage. It's actually one wall that's graffitied in the handwriting.
That's one graffiti wall, yeah.
Right.
So if you've got one photo and the shutter's open for 2 minutes, the area with the most light is going to be really, really overly exposed.
Okay.
So I need to bring that back down. You can't do that with an Instagram filter. You can't do that, and without Lightroom. There was another one. I forgot the name. I don't use it.
I got what you're saying.
If you want to do that, yeah, you have to. That's the only way you can do that. You can't do that with an Instagram filter. You can change the contrast and stuff, but the technology, it's very rudimentary. That technology.
Yes.
Lightroom is a professional level, and if you want your work to be taken professionally, so this image is going to the Affordable Art Fair next week. It's going to be exhibited.
The Affordable Art Fair.
Yeah, so I've got 10 images on display at the Affordable Art Fair next week.
Where's that being held?
That's in Battersea Park in London.
And is that something that's on like every month, or is it like a once a year event?
It's twice a year. It's for 3 days: Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, 3 days.
Interesting.
I think that's the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Is that? Yeah. So that's a big moment for me. And there's 5,000 people in there. There's going to be a lot of press, a lot of people, a lot of opinions. So just to go, just talk about go back to my story slightly.
Yep.
So my 1234, my handwriting series they were just complete hobbies. I wasn't supposed to be. They weren't supposed to get to the kind of level where the image behind me, where they're on. That's a huge image. That's a jumbo image. It's life size. It's very clear. It's expensive to print. It's expensive to sell. But I had
just so people understand. Sorry to interject, but something like that, because again, I wouldn't have a clue. What does something like that, just for actually the cost of it? Obviously, something to do with your time, just the actual printing cost and getting that image right behind you. Like, what are we talking? Because I don't have a clue.
Well, obviously, I don't know. I can't say the cost because I can only tell. But the gallery has just put that. They just priced that at 1,500. That image behind me.
Okay.
I don't want to give away the secrets of my cost because
no. I didn't mean it.
margin.
I didn't mean it in that way. Was just interested to know, like, you said expensive. What are we talking? A few £100, talking £20? Like, yeah.
Oh, okay. It's hundreds of pounds.
Just to print it, forgetting your talent and everything else. Wow.
Yeah, just to print, just to go. I mean, that's in New York. So I had an Instagram series. It kind of caught on. It's called Handwriting series, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
Handwriting.
Yes, if you type that into Instagram.
Yep.
So that caught people's attention and people's imagination. Then I was offered a book deal with this publisher called Unicorn. That came out 2 years ago. Sold out now. It's online only.
And at the same time, you're a hairdresser, right? All alongside all this.
At the same time, yeah. And then people started asking me if they could buy prints from the book. And I'd never sold prints before. I'd obviously have printed stuff in part of the course, but I hadn't done anything big and I hadn't done anything digital.
Mm-hmm.
So getting it from an Instagram quality to a book quality to suddenly museum, gallery, exhibition quality has been quite a journey. But so I didn't feel like I had a choice. I felt like I've been given a gift. Just by doing something you're interested in, and I was going to do it anyway, and I still would be doing it anyway. But to have it to catch on, I mean, when that book came out, it was in the New York Times, it was in the Guardian,
wow.
it went everywhere. It was such an amazing moment. So to keep that, building that momentum, and take it to the next step, and learn how to print things properly, So I realized when I started in earnest to print them, the quality of the images weren't high enough. So I always promised myself I would never go into a bathroom with a tripod. The next thing you know, I'm in a bathroom with a tripod to get the images to the standard that I wanted. Then I realized the images I'd taken, some of them were in New York and I loved them, and I wanted them to be part of my exhibition, which was supposed to be in 2020, but it's in 2022. The ones in New York, which I loved, weren't high quality enough to exhibit. So I booked a flight, went back to New York, retook all the images, which meant I got things like the ones behind me, I was always worried because I'm come quite late into this. I wanted every image to be crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, that meant that's a really small aperture. It's a really slow shutter speed. You want everything to be in focus, which takes a long time. But also now, because I've done that, the problem I actually had is they're so hyper real. People don't realize they're photographs.
Yeah.
So in a funny way, I've actually gone too far.
Too real.
They're too real for people. I think people expect to see a bit of softness. They don't expect everything to be in focus.
Yes.
Especially with the subject. They like the subject to be in focus and then the bokeh behind it and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I wanted them to be hyper real and as really high quality. So that's been an interesting personal journey about taste and almost being too technically proficient with the image. Sorry, go on.
When you were doing your A-level photography course, were you aware that you were more talented than other people, or you were more interested in other people, or was it just you were just good at it, or were you not that good then, or?
Well, there was a guy on the course who was the guy who was going to go and do be a cinematographer, and he was very big, and he had his dark room in his house and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I would take photos and people would be like, "Wow, you've got such a good eye," and then I was like, "Wow, maybe I'm quite good at this." And then I chose not to take it any further, like I said. And then, but with Instagram and stuff, I'd post photos every now and then, and people would be like, "Wow, you've got such a good eye for this," and I'd be like, "Oh, I enjoy it, and I like taking photos." And But I got so worried about what people thought that I didn't actually post anything on my personal Instagram until 2020.
Okay.
So I was always had this voice in the back of my head of saying, "Who do you think? Who do you think you are? You can't. You're not this person."
The self-doubt. What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the self-doubt.
What do I have to say that people want to look at and all the rest of it? Yeah.
Exactly. So I put everything into Handwriting. So that account became quite big and synonymous. It got a really lovely following.
Nice.
And then the 1234 was those were my two, and then my personal one I didn't post anything on there. It was all, a bit artistic. But when the New York Times article came out, and I suddenly
How did that
realized
come about? How did that come about?
that was through the publisher. They had a
Okay.
design section.
Got it.
In May 2020.
And the publisher found you via your Instagram account.
Yes, I took the idea to the London Book Fair to show people, and they were like, "Let's do this." And I was like, "Okay, cool."
So it's interesting. You struck on something that I think is really interesting. In as far as you talked about, you would do the same thing even if there was no financial gain or it hadn't blown up, quote unquote, as it has done for you. And I talk a lot about this, that too many people are, and I've done this before in my career, in business for sure, like pinning everything I have on a certain desired outcome. If it doesn't happen, I'm a failure, all the rest of it. That's a side point. But more importantly, like, people have to understand, how many years were you doing, or how long rather were you posting on this Handwriting account before anything really materialized? Let's go with that.
Well, the Handwriting thing, I had this. I thought they were interesting. I took one. I was in Edinburgh, and someone had written in massive letters on the Handwriting, "Not working." And I thought, isn't that interesting that's got this tiny little snapshot of a story, and it's got a little personality.
Yeah.
But before that, I was in New York in 2007 or 2009, I think.
Yeah.
And there was a bar there called Max Fish, which is quite famous, and it's had different incarnations. It just closed down.
Just closed down.
It's like, yeah, it's closed down a couple of times. It's the victim of COVID. So it's closed. I'm sure it reopened, but it's just closed down. And they had this bathroom. And it was similar to the one behind me. Like, it was absolutely battered, this bathroom. I'd never seen a bath. I'd never seen anything like that before. It was just, I'd seen like bathroom graffiti, and funny quips on the wall and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
But I'd never seen anything quite to that degree, where it's just the entire room is a canvas. And this is incredible. This room is incredible. It's an amazing snapshot of a time and a place. And then I took a photo of it, and I didn't think anything about it. And then I thought about this Handwriting when I was in Edinburgh at the festival. And then I thought, maybe, they are quite interesting. Maybe I'll just capture them and see if anything comes out of it. So I did that, and then I put them on Instagram, and all my friends thought I was absolutely bonkers. And they would write these funny comments underneath, kind of like trying to take the piss.
Who's laughing now,
Yeah, yeah. So then I started the actual account, the physical account. Because I thought, if I make it public and I push it, it forces me to be better at it.
Yeah, accountability.
And then suddenly, when there is, yeah, exactly, which I've done with another Instagram called Telephone Booth as well, and the same as 1234. But I pushed it forward, and suddenly, when they're in a series and they're in a grid, and the composition's the same, so the composition's always the same. The subject's in the middle, and it's the scene that it's in and the things around it, which kind of tell you the story about where you are, about the venue that you're in, the people that use it. And bathrooms are quite interesting as a room, because they're not like a living room and a bar or a bedroom. They're destinations. You go there. Whereas a bathroom is it's an in-between room. You only go there momentarily, which is interesting. It's the only, maybe apart from a hallway in a house. But if you're in a bar and you're on a date, if you're having a shit time, you go to the toilet, and it's a chance to reflect. And that a Handwriting is literally a moment of reflection or doing nothing.
Yeah,
which
true.
Is quite.
It's right. It's also interesting in modern life. Of course, we're always on our phones, having the hands. When you're using a Handwriting, you don't. So maybe one of the only times a lot of people during the day for 30 seconds is no phone. There's just all you're thinking, and you're not thinking about your Handwriting. You often subconsciously something's running through your brain. So maybe you become conscious of that subconscious thought. So that's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. And also bathrooms, they've got there's an anonymity in a bathroom, which is also interesting. You can go, you have an opportunity to do anything you want in a bathroom. You lock a door.
There's never any cameras, of course.
There's legally no cameras. You're not in your house. You can choose to be almost to be your real self in that bathroom. So
Interesting.
you can write something on the wall with no accountability. You can be positive, you can be negative, you can make a mess if you want to, which I'm sure a lot of people do. You
Yeah.
can
Not wash your
take
hands.
someone
A lot of
else,
people do that as well.
not wash your hands. You can take someone else in there with you if you're feeling
Yeah.
very generous.
Drugs
But
and all the rest of it. Yeah.
you can leave a mark on the wall of your whatever you want to leave. Like the one
Yeah.
behind me.
You just twitched the camera off, I think, momentarily.
Oh, it's the voicemail.
That's right. There we go. Back.
Sorry, I thought I had that one.
No, we're gone.
Sorry, I thought I put it on. Oh my god, embarrassing.
No, it's okay. There we go. That's good.
There we go.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting. Have you heard of the Reith lectures?
The
Reith, Reith, Reith. It's the guy. It's the chairman of the BBC. The guy who started Lord Reith, who started the BBC.
No, I have not. Carry on.
So they every year on Radio 4 they have a series of lectures called the Reith lectures at Christmas.
Okay.
And in 2013 it was Grayson Perry. Grayson Perry gave 4 speeches about the art world and trying to break down boundaries and make it more accessible and explain it to people. But one of the things that he said in that Reith lecture is I've listened to it about 6 times. And once I listened to it last week actually.
Okay.
One of the things he was talking about is how the compulsion to create as humans is so powerful. He talked about there was a cave. They found these cave drawings. These cavemen had drawn 20,000 years ago. And when they carbon dated them, they realized that they were 10,000 years apart, these 2 drawings.
Right.
So we automatically assume it's a caveman, it's the same time. But a caveman's gone in there 20,000 years ago and he's drawn a picture of whatever he's wanted to draw. 10,000 years, handwriting, yeah. 10,000 years later, someone else has gone in there and I felt equally as compelled rather to create and leave that mark. And then if you look at the image behind me, I mean, some of those drawings, especially the one with the little eye, they're caveman-esque. They're simplistic and they're rudimentary. And there is that compulsion for us to leave a mark and create.
Steve Jobs' quote, obviously the founder of Apple, co-founder of Apple, is leave a dent in the universe, and it's the same kind of thought. You want to leave some legacy behind, or whether it's your children, whether it's something, a project you've done or something. Yeah, that kind of idea.
Exactly. Yeah. So I find that interesting, and I think the bathrooms and what they represent, and they're a moment between moments. There's like a purgatory of bathrooms. You're waiting. There's a chance to, if you're having a shit night, it's a chance to maybe think, oh God, how am I going to get out of this? Or you're having a good night and you're on a date and you give yourself a little pep talk and walk back out there like Rocky.
Going back to what I said before, I think which is important for people to understand. You started this handwriting thing because it was interesting to you, purely interesting as a side thing in roughly 2009 in New York. And now we are
kind of
around then. Now we are 13 years later, and now I'm not saying now things taking off, but like certainly people are becoming more aware of you publicly outside of maybe your core following from previously. So I'm trying to explain to people that I always say this, like, look at Joe Rogan, the famous podcaster. He's got £100 million deal with Spotify. Maybe that won't exist anymore, but who knows? He does it currently. But if you look at his very first video on YouTube, the quality's poor, everything's poor. But for 10 years or so, he did 3 videos a week. He didn't do 3 videos a week for 10 years because he thought he'd get £100 million deal from Spotify. He did it because he's purely interested and passionate about it. And that comes through. I think if you see people creatively or whatever that are purely doing it for, their own gain, and it's pretty obvious, in the questions they ask and how they come across and whatnot. And like, for me, for example, like just talking about why I do this, like I do this because I like to speak to people like you. It gives me an opportunity to speak to people like you. It gives you an opportunity to share your story, and hopefully if one person watches this, listens to it, whatever, and goes, oh, I really wanted to do X and I don't know how to get involved with that, and it gives them a little bit of a push to do something, that's a win-win. So that's how I kind of, why I do what I do. Like, if in 5 years' time it becomes a huge podcast, great. But that's not the motivation. I'm pretty sure that comes across. Hopefully that's not what I'm trying to do here. It's just to genuinely speak to interesting people and to give them a platform to share their story. And back on that, I'm also interesting, I think, is that, what would on that note of kind of inspiring and motivate people, what would your advice be to someone who's in a job where they love it, they don't love it. It's kind of now they're here there for this second, but they have a creative pursuit, or they used to play a sport or a hobby or something. Um, or how do you follow that? Do you just go? Are you just gut instinct? Do you think how do people get more out of life, maybe outside of just the work?
If you have a burning desire to create things,
Good
I
phrase.
don't think
Good phrase.
I I don't think
It's the name of the
I don't think
podcast.
people.
That's why.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, yeah, sorry. That's
Thanks for that.
subconscious. No problem, no problem. Um, I don't think anything will stay in your way. I mean, I'm a hairdresser by trade, and I'm surrounded by people that want to be better at their jobs. And hair's an interesting one because you're kind of learning as you go.
In
So
respect of of the physical profession, or from people that you're talking to, because I find hairdressing very interesting as a industry, because
yeah,
you get such a period of time with people where they tell you everything. Become very friendly with them, of course, over years. They trust you. They always want to go to you, and you pretty much become their almost sounding board or therapist in some respects, right?
well, that's they say after 10 years you've got a degree in psychology.
Right.
And it is a sounding board, but to be honest, it's more of a sounding board for me. I can just talk and talk and talk and talk, and then I go home and I've got nothing on my mind. And my
That's awesome.
yeah, the people around you aren't as lucky as that. It is quite a lucky place to be in. But the place that I work, we have an education company, which I don't teach anymore, but we teach. I used to teach all over the world. It was amazing to see the sacrifice that some people will go through and the money they'll spend, because they have to pay to be on these courses. It's not like being a doctor or a lawyer where people send you on the course and you're being paid, you've got your day off and all that kind of stuff. These people, they sacrifice their day off. They sacrifice their day off. They pay their money. I mean, our courses were like, I think they were 5,000 for 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
So they're spending a lot of money. So there's a lot of responsibility on my shoulders to make sure that they have to go away from that experience in a better professional than when they walk in that room. So I have to be in a position where whatever happens, I know more than them.
Yeah.
I have to be better than them. I have to be more refined than them. I have to give them tips and all these kinds of things.
Yeah. Prove your value.
Yeah. So that, I mean, the same you were talking about earlier about foods. There's a billion hairdressers on the planet. There's a bunch of people who charge £5 and don't give a shit, and there's a bunch of people who charge £500 and they'll make you feel like a god. So back to your question about what do these people do? If you can't help but create something, I just think it will come out. It could be words, it could be photos, it could be art. It doesn't have to be for any particular reason. My friend's mum is an amazing artist, but she never shows anyone. She keeps it all in her front room, and she might sell one if she has to at an art fair in the local area, things like that.
Yeah.
But I think about it quite a lot. It's quite inspiring to you just can't help it. It's like being was this John Cooper Clarke, the poet?
They're not. I'm not very. It seems I'm not very. You've mentioned a few people. I'm like, probably should know who they are. Unfortunately, I don't.
Well, he's from Manchester, so you're letting your side down.
I really am.
He's the inspiration for the Arctic Monkeys. That's why. That's why Alex Turner sounds like Alex Turner because he was inspired by John Cooper Clarke. And then that song, I forgot what it's called. Let me be your. Do you know that song with the?
Is it Arctic Monkey song?
Yeah.
You carry on. I'll find out what the song is. Let's have a look. Arctic
Monkeys. Let me be.
Arctic Monkeys, right? I'm looking at. That's on the top 5 songs.
I want to be yours. I want to be yours. It's called.
Yeah. Just want that. Yeah.
So that's a cover of a John Cooper Clarke poem.
Okay, got you.
So John Cooper Clarke is interesting because he says that poetry is the only art form everyone has a go at.
Right.
Most people might not be a writer. They want to think I can write a book, but most people think I bet I could write a poem.
I would say in the modern world, it's now photography, because everyone takes photos.
Yeah,
everyone's a photographer now. On Instagram, a selfie, or this thing, or that thing, the other thing. I would say that's replaced that now, personally.
Maybe, yeah. But when you go to a funeral, you're not reaching for a camera. You're reaching for a poem.
Okay.
there's something very powerful about poetry. That concise. It could be 4 lines, and it says more in those 4 lines
True.
Than a book can. But
Very
it's
true.
interesting when you hear him interviewed. He was on Desert Island Discs talking about his career and his journey. He used to be the front man, like he'd gone before the Sex Pistols and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he's played some tough old crowds. But he's working class. Went to school. Told his teachers and his parents he wanted to be a poet, and everybody told him he's mad. And you don't make any money being a poet.
Yeah.
If you keep going, and you become. I mean, his work is in every school in Britain now. He's part of the syllabus. His poems,
Amazing.
which is how Alex Turner discovered him. But I mean, that's sheer determination.
It's what it takes, though. You got to just, if you truly, as you say, have this burning desire or passion to do something, and it comes from a genuine place of you're just interested in it and you want to kind of express yourself. I mean, I think it was. I was reading Will Smith's memoir, which is phenomenal. I do book reviews as well on LinkedIn, so you can read it there if you want to find it. And he talks about this fact of like a creative hose, like just can't stop, and people that are, I think everyone's creative, but unfortunately in our schooling system, they say if you can't draw, then or you can't do this, then you're not creative. But you can be creative by doing a podcast or a business idea or or a nice dinner you make for your other half. Like that's creative. Like creativity is so many different things. In my opinion, it's just having an idea and doing something about it. Like that's creative. Even having the idea in the first place.
Yeah.
I've got a couple.
Carry on. I agree. I think everyone's creative. I meet a lot of people. They'll say to me, "Oh, I wish I was creative like you." And I'm like, "Well, you're an accountant. You're creative with numbers.
Yeah.
If you're a lawyer, you're creative with the law. Nothing. You have to find ways to solve problems.
Yep.
Creatively. I'd read this week that you make 35,000 decisions a day.
Okay.
The average human, which is 1 a second over the course of 10 hours. So it's probably actually more.
Yeah.
So when they're indecisive or they say, "Oh, I can't make a decision," like you make decisions every second.
Yeah. All the time. Yeah. That's where like you get not that I necessarily disagree with this, but the likes of Mark Zuckerberg and even presidents that they call it decision fatigue, where if they wear the same clothes every day, not the same t-shirt, but the same colors and everything else, so that they don't have to make that decision. Because if your brain can only process a certain amount of decisions as well. And so if you're taking that up with, say, your lunch option or whatever, with the people that are highly, need their abilities, their processing power for more complex problems, they effectively delegate all the non-essential decision-making to their assistants and to whomever. So then when it comes time to make a big decision, like whether you go to war or whether or not to invest £1 billion in something, like you've got full focus rather than, you've already fatigued by what t-shirt to wear, all these mundane things for these people.
Exactly.
There's a few things.
What questions you got? Sorry.
Yeah, a few interesting things. So your book Handwriters, the foreword's by Sir James Dyson, right?
Yeah.
How? That's amazing. Like how did that come about? Like tell me more. I think he's an amazing guy. I've not read his book yet, his recent one, but everything about that guy. And tell you what really frustrates me before you go into that. Why he's not heralded as a hero in this country. Because if he's in America, he's a hero. Here, all right, do you want us to move to Singapore, whatever? I don't understand. For here, we don't elevate people and put people that should be. What he's done is amazing, and yet here he's kind of like most people know their name, but they don't really know much about him, or I don't know. I just find it frustrating looking at that.
Yeah, I heard him on the How I Built This podcast, and he said that I think for the original Hoover there was
250 designs.
No, it's like 1,700 or something.
I've heard different numbers, but it's a lot. Yeah, all rejected. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wrote it down. For him to get that cycle working, took him 1,705 times, the 106th time it worked.
We'll go with that.
The reason that I got him for the forward, the publisher that I'm with, they had previously released a book about his teacher. His art teacher was the person who recommended he become a product designer.
Right.
So he'd written the forward to that book, and then when they saw my book, they approached him again, and he happily wrote a little extended quote. It's not quite forward, if I'm honest.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's still nice, amazing to have him involved.
Do you ever speak to him in person, or was it just kind of a at arm's length transaction, for want of a better phrase?
arm's length. They were very nice, and they did suggest about working together in some way, shape, or form. But then I didn't hear back from them. I did chase it a little bit, but
Yeah.
I thought they might be a little bit pissed because my first exhibition, I didn't. There were no Dysons in the exhibition,
Oh, okay.
so I didn't really
Want to push it?
just photographically. Yeah, I didn't want to be like, do you want to come see an exhibition that you're not in?
It's all your competitors. Why don't you come see him?
Yeah, come and have a look. But I don't know why he's not revered. Like Richard Branson is far more revered than
Yeah,
Dyson. But I mean, Dyson's he went to a public school and everything, but he's self-made, and
absolutely.
he spent all his money on the gamble of. He's very interesting actually. That podcast that How I Made This because he did no he didn't ask anyone if they wanted to buy this Hoover. There was no he didn't no questionnaires. He
Purely
didn't
product, yeah,
get any public.
purely product led.
Yeah, he was just like, I'm going to make this Hoover and I'm going to see what happens.
That's what
That's
Steve
what he did.
Jobs does. That's what Steve Jobs used to do. He just didn't care what people think because his approach was people don't know what they want until they see it. And now, we look at iPhones. I just got this thing here, which is phenomenal on the back of the phone. Just a MagSafe charger, right? Now, before you have it, you're like, why would you ever need that? Now I've got it. I can't believe I've never had it before. Same with the iPhone.
Yeah.
Remember, it's only 2007. And I'm at an unusual age where, yes, the internet was around when I was starting to grow up, but it was dial up, etc. But the iPhone wasn't around, and Instagram wasn't around, and Twitter wasn't around. So from where I'm at to my cousin who's 10 years younger, the world he grew up in was so different. I mean, of course, it always does change, but I think the pace of change in the past 10 years or 15 years has been phenomenal, and it looks like it's only going to continue with the NFT culture and the metaverse. And actually, whilst I bring on that subject, what's your opinion on this from an artist's perspective and also a personal perspective?
I've just actually been offered an NFT for 1234.
Okay. What does that mean? Someone's going to build the tech behind it for you? Is that what they're saying?
Build it. Yeah, they want to build it and put it up for auction.
Wow. You going to do it?
I mean, that's very new. That's only last week. I mean, for me, the revolution of NFTs is things that you previously couldn't monetize. You can subtly monetize. So, I mean, from a practical sense of view, exactly, point of view. 1234 was just a passion project that I've loved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you were going to monetize it, maybe if you're lucky, you could have an exhibition.
Yeah.
If you had an exhibition, they wouldn't. You could maybe exhibit. I mean, there's a lot of images, so maybe 2-inch squared images. You're going to sell them? Probably not. It's a lot of money. What do you do with it when you're finished? You put it up somewhere permanently. And suddenly NFTs, you're in this world where you can sell these things to people. You've got there's royalties. There's no royalty. Like this image behind me. If I sell that tomorrow, and the next person flips it, I don't get any of that money.
Right.
So they're benefiting from and if let's say in the next 12 months, 10 years, my reputation explodes, and that thing is worth 10 times.
Yeah.
That's 100 grand. They get that 100 grand. I don't get any of that money.
So with NFTs, you can put a spot in where you retain a 5% ownership type thing. Is that what you're suggesting, or whatever it is?
Yeah, you can. So you put a royalty in perpetuity. So every single sale, let's say it's sold the next 100 times in the next 20 years. Every time it's sold, you get 10%.
Oh, so it's only the same as a musician, an artist getting paid the royalties on the song, right? They don't just produce it once, sell it once, and then they become huge, and then they don't get any money anymore. Makes sense.
Exactly, yeah. So, and also, I mean, in a hand dryer's capacity, a lot of those images didn't make it into the book. I've taken maybe a couple thousand since the book came out. Some of them are the ones that are good enough to exhibit like this. You have to walk a long way to find images as special as this one, where it's just like an art show in the bathroom. But suddenly I can sell the ones that aren't quite as good as that. I can suddenly in a position where you could sell them as a project.
Would you consider, because the way trajectory of career is going now in photography, do you ever see it being a full-time thing? Do you want it to be a full-time thing, or are you really happy with also the hairdressing side of stuff, and this is a sideline?
This is a sideline. I'd like it to overtake hairdressing. I don't think I'd give up hairdressing, but I do want the freedom of exploration. So I want to start doing. I started last year taking. I find bus stations extremely interesting.
Preston bus station. I saw it was very cool.
Yeah, Preston bus station. Basildon bus station is fantastic. which is like
It's
this
just funny because
83.
some people go through these things and you talk about, again, the quote you said again, noticing unnoticed objects and architecture of modern life. Like people go through, I was walking just the other day and I do this a lot now. I take photos or whatever. And this is a really nice Roman Catholic church. I mean, it's stunning. And it's literally in the back of nowhere, like in Prestwich, where I'm from. And you wouldn't know. But if I say, go over that photo and said, oh, this is from Rome, you'd be like, yeah, nice. There's so much out there, if you actually open your eyes and, you look up rather than kind of looking at your phone. I do that as well, let's be honest. Like, it's no problem with that. But I think it's nice to actually see what's going on out there.
Yeah. I mean, these kinds of things, I've always thought them, but I didn't give myself permission to pursue them. But mostly because that little voice in the back of your head that says, "Who do you think you are? You're not that. You're not that guy. That someone else does that." But slowly but surely, in a kind of Neo-esque Matrixy way, you start to think, "No, maybe I am that. Maybe it is me. I am that guy who does these things." Because you have to be synonymous with something. Your reputation. You want people to look at your work and go, "Oh, I know who took that." In fact, I got. So we had a client, a new client came in the salon a few months ago, and she saw an image. I've got them on display in the salon, and she thought that she knew who I was from social media, and she'd read an interview with me, and she thought that someone was copying my work. So she asked to speak to the artist, and when it was me, she was like, "Oh, you're the guy," and I was like, "Yeah." She's like, I was about to confront you because I thought you were copying someone else's work.
Oh,
wow,
I see.
What an amazing moment that is.
That is amazing.
So yeah, I'd love to go. I want to start doing Greyhound stations in America. There's a whole host of Art Deco stations from the 20s and 30s that aren't used anymore. Some of them are, but a lot of them are just sitting there unused, and they're amazing. But there's some big distances in between them. But I thought it'd be interesting if you were to collect them and maybe get the Greyhound bus between them as well. Maybe collect some stories of people on there.
That would be cool.
Why they're on there. I think bus stations they're the most democratic form of transport. But you don't need a passport. They're cheap. You don't have to go to an airport. They're not in any way exclusive. But because of that, they're a little bit seedy. They're a little bit naughty. There's something scary about them. There's maybe people in there that you don't want to hang out with, but anybody can be in there. And I think it's worth exploring. And so I'm going to start that in May. I'm going to go to Detroit, have a little bit about Detroit. They go to Cleveland. There's an old one in Cleveland. They go to Pittsburgh. And nice. Go back to New York and get some more.
You did a piece on.
So I'd like to have.
Go on. Sorry, carry on. Sorry.
Go on, carry on.
No, carry on. Sorry, you like to have.
No, I just want to need to get more hand dryers from New York because my collection's running dry.
What is it about New York and hand dryers? Is there not good hand dryers in like Austria or like New Zealand, or what about New York? Is it appeals to you?
New York, because America have got dive bars, and Britain we don't really have dive bars. We have our pubs will have like utilitarian toilets that are just thoughtless. Yeah. You might have the odd rock and roll bar.
Yeah,
but they're few and far between.
Got you.
Whereas in New York, it's just like they're just everywhere, every single way, and there's like almost like a badge of honor that your bathroom has to be just a filthy, disgusting. They're not a mess. I wouldn't say they're a mess, but they are definitely. There's like an unspoken rule that they're up for grabs. That wall space is anybody can use that wall space. Whereas I do have an image here actually. If I flip the camera around,
yeah, go for it.
Which is a rare version of a UK one. So that's in the George Tavern, Commercial Road. So that's very much like what I was saying earlier about that, the anonymity that you enjoy when you're in a bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, this one is, if I just show you some of the things people write on them.
Very good.
Alan McGee for King.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start looking at hand dryers. I'm gonna start sending you pictures of the hand dryers that I see.
Oh yeah, I'm very up for that. I mean, if I just show you this one in detail, actually, you probably start to see some like
more
of the detail in the image.
Outrageous of this picture. Wow.
Yeah. So this is film on acrylic.
Wow.
That's the actual hand dryer there.
Wow.
And like things like these stories and who's written that, why they put that number, what happens if you phone it.
Wow. So interesting.
The roads must roll. I mean, what the fuck does that mean?
Wow.
Who's written that? Why have they written it?
Yeah, what was going
So
through their
that's what I
mind at
like.
the time?
Yeah. But I also had my first exhibition exactly 4 weeks ago. So to have them all on the wall exhibited
It's awesome.
together was a pretty special moment, to be honest. It's the first time you can have the whole narrative there and complete the story.
Talking of narratives, you did a piece in Chernobyl, right? Can
Yes.
you talk a bit more about that?
Well, I went to Chernobyl. So when I got the book deal, I was head down to find as many handwriters as I physically could.
Yeah.
I went, and if I thought there'd be one somewhere, I was off. So I thought Chernobyl might be quite interesting, because it's all derelict bathrooms. You just don't know what you're going to find there. So I went to Kiev, which is interesting.
It's supposed to be a stunning place. Yeah. Obviously, right now is a bit challenging, but yeah, it's supposed to be in
It
general.
is, yeah, it's quite big. I mean, it's very. I was surprised how Russian it was, which is why I'm so surprised. It did feel. I mean, the hotel we were in was called Hotel Russ, and the reason it's called Hotel Russ is because the SIA had fallen off at the end.
Okay.
So it was the Hotel Russia, and that's the Hotel Russ. Everything was a strip club. There was a strip club in the hotel. My girlfriend had never been to a strip club
Seriously,
before.
in the hotel.
Honestly, though, yeah. One day we came back, we went to bed, and there were just two prostitutes sitting on the couch on our floor in the hotel. So I think, and I don't know if they were waiting for people or if you were supposed to make them an offer, but like that kind of stuff. You go to Chernobyl, you get up really early, you go there and you wait for the checkpoint, and then you're in, and it's the same size as Luxembourg. I mean, the stats around it are mad. There's 400 towns and villages. I can't remember how many people were moved. So we're in the minibus. We stop about 5 minutes after we cross the checkpoint, and the guy says, "If you go into those woods there's an entire village." And you're like, "Okay." So you walk past the first tree, and then there's just 10 houses, all abandoned, all their stuff, all their toys, all the newspapers. And then went to the swimming pool and all the big famous places, and it's kind of surreal walking through these people's houses. If you feel it, even though you know there's no one there, you still feel there's a sense of trespass, and it doesn't sit well being in these people's lives. But I tried to get as many. I thought I would walk in and there'd be loads of hand dryers everywhere, but there was nothing, just completely derelict. And in the famous swimming pool shot that everyone loves, or someone had knocked down all the lockers, so the lockers had just fallen down like dominoes. So you couldn't even get in the changing rooms. I'd love that to have been quite a big sound. But the one thing I did notice there while I was there, there was a phone booth in the supermarket in Pripyat. Pripyat's the famous town next to the power plant. And it was the first supermarket in the Soviet Union, and it had a phone box in the corner of it. I tried to get the guy to stop. He wouldn't stop because he wasn't part of the tour. So when I got home, I emailed him and I said, "Look, I'm doing a project on phone booths. It'd be interesting if I could go and capture this one. Can I come?" And they were like, "Yep, to our knowledge, there's 4 phone booths in the exclusion zone. If you want to come over, we'll happily take you around them, and we'll spend the whole day trying to find the other ones." And I was like, "That sounds like a fun day."
Yeah, for sure.
So I was going to go. I was supposed to do that this year in April, because the one thing I didn't realize when I got there is how overgrown it is. It's just been taken back by nature, and because I went in the summer, it was just, you couldn't see anything. So I wanted to go back start of spring with slightly later nights, but with less foliage. But obviously, that's not going to happen this year.
Two more questions I have. One is, obviously I found you via the BBC video. Was that a similar, just a kind of crescendo of things from the book to the Instagram, and then someone from BBC got in touch? Is that how that came about?
Basically, yeah. One of my clients just told her friend at the BBC that this thing was approaching 10 years. That was in October. And she said, "Well, I think it sounds quite interesting. We'd like to get involved." And then to be honest, I didn't really hear back from her until about January. And I really pushed, because I wanted, if they were going to be interested with a bit of notice, I thought it would have been cool to do an exhibition. But I didn't hear from them until the day before the anniversary. So it was 5 p.m. on the Tuesday, and they were there on the Wednesday.
Wow.
Yeah.
And my last question, which I think is a nice way to end this, is for an amateur photographer out there who's using an iPhone or an Android or whatnot, what advice would you give to kind of take better photos, or what they should be thinking about when they're taking the photos? Is there a certain proportions, or you just kind of shoot what you think you're happy with and go with that?
Number one, another thing I see all the time is clean your lens. Clean the lens immediately. There's so many people take photos and they're
Hold
rude.
on, let me grab my. I'm just gonna. I've never done this. I've got the cloth, and clean the lens.
Yeah, clean the lens. Number one, especially if you're doing night photography on a phone, because if the lens isn't clean, you can tell right straight away that the lens isn't clean.
Right.
The big one is just find something you love and just document it. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to go to a far-flung place. You can document where you live. You can document the people that on your street. You can find stories everywhere. But the stories that are out there to be found. One of the nice things about the first lockdown is I gave myself a 10-minute parameter. So I just had a walk within 10 minutes of my flat. And I found loads of stuff like concrete factories and interesting graffiti and underpasses on roads and buildings I hadn't noticed before with history or those kinds of things. They are there. And the more you photograph them, obviously the light changes every day, the weather changes, the people around them changes. Everything's changing whether you notice it or not. Which is a nice thing about 1234 because you don't realize something's aged until it's aged. But so you look back at those photos and something you take for granted. Like if you look at Brick Lane, for instance, or the area I live in, there'll be a wall that's covered in paint. And you're like, oh, that wall's just been covered in paint the whole time. And then you look back and you're like, wow, that wall was pristine 10 years ago. Just without noticing that whole area has been transformed or painted or changed. And you wouldn't normally document that thing. I've documented things people don't normally document, which are, in a funny way, are more indicative of the time that you live in. Without really realizing, like, obviously the big one, Samuel Pepys, the diarist. Like a diary isn't interesting on the day; it's interesting afterwards.
Yeah.
And 1234 is the same thing. It is essentially a diary. And diaries are only interesting after the event. They're not interesting the day after or the week after. Samuel Pepys, I think his diaries were read 100 years after he died. He lived through Charles I, Charles II, Restoration, the Great Fire of London, and the Plague. I mean, what a snapshot of 9.5 years he was writing for. What a 9 years they are.
Good stretch.
Yeah, in 100 years, you'll look back and you're like, oh God, this guy took photos over Brexit, over COVID, over the Olympics, all those kinds of amazing moments. They are in your life, but in the words of Ferris Bueller, if you don't stop and take a look around once in a while, it passes you by. Or you might miss it. Oh, I've misquoted him. You might miss it.
I think that's a really great spot to leave the conversation. It's been really interesting. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing where your career goes, which is only going to go one direction, and that's upwards for sure.
Hopefully it doesn't blow.
It won't, and if it does, you'll figure something else out. Be a good ride.
I'll take a photo of it.
Thanks so much for your time. Cheers.
Okay, thanks. Take care.